Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Cardcasters, and it is episode 6. It's been a little while, but we're back with another fantastic episode ahead for you. And today we are talking with Todd Michael Rogers, the designer of the solo strategy card game, which he refers to as a tabletop novel. It's very interesting. Todd, how are you doing? Welcome to the podcast.
I am good. I'm half awake, but that's probably true for you as well.
It's almost 1 a.m., but this is sort of my prime time, so I'm good. So could you tell us a bit about yourself? Where do you hail from? What have you worked on? How did you get into this whole game design gig?
I was born in Hollywood, California. I just like that fact about myself.
That's pretty interesting.
Well, I was also born on a day that doesn't exist. On my birth certificate, it says Thrust Day, so that's not a real legal date. So I don't know if I actually legally exist. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, which is, everyone knows something about Nashville. Right now, there's so much pollen in the air here that I had to buy cough drops to do this podcast so that I could actually talk because my throat is raw from pollen and screaming in the band. I have been designing games ever since I was a little kid. When my parents said I wasn't allowed to have a Nintendo, so I decided to make a cardboard Nintendo, which didn't exactly work out.
That sounds quite sad, but also something I think maybe quite a few of us can relate to.
Probably so. Yeah, for sure.
We're here to talk to you about your game Spell Saga. Would you like to tell our listeners a little bit about what it is? Is there a kind of an elevator pitch that you've perfected by now as to explaining what kind of game this is? Because this is such a unique game, and I myself think it's quite difficult to explain just what it is. So have you mastered that pitch by now?
Oh, yeah. Kind of. It's taken a long time. Spell Saga was a mistake. No, it's a thing. It's a thing that I made that took over my life. No, me and my cousin, Lauren Rogers, she illustrates it and also does, some prototype sort of gameplay and tells me when it's when she's like, there's too many white guys in the snow. I'm like, okay, we'll change it up a little bit. Like, she's really good at stuff. So we it is a tabletop novel. It's a solo player card game that feels something like an RPG and a book on a rainy day. It's always different, but the story is always the same. You don't need anything except the cards. There's no dice. It helps to have a coin or something to have a hero token, but you can always use the box if you need to. It's somewhat unique, but feels familiar. I struggled to describe it. It's taken me years just to get that succinct, but which is nothing. But it kind of doesn't feel like other things to me because it feels like you're writing and reading a book at the same time while you're playing it.
I'd agree with that completely. Yeah. This is why I wanted to talk to you about this, because not only is it a strategy card game, which is our forte around here, but it's also something that there is no precedent for, at least not that I've come across. And it is somewhat of a game, somewhat of interactive fiction. I'm going to get really nerdy now, but it reminds me of the cut-up method of writing from William Burroughs, that kind of where he write a story and then cut up the whole pages and then sort of just rearrange them. And because the way this card game tells this story, it's not exactly linear, is it?
It's as linear as the author wanted it to be. So you are correct, and yet there is also ways that I've tried to make it hit at certain points, whether that be the order that the decks are played in or released. Which is not in a chronological order either, or if it's moments during gameplay that can only be reached by growing to certain levels.
Right. So let's just explain how the game comes to you packaged. So what are the game components? There's numerous decks. Can you just sort of give us a quick structure of how the game works? Like, how many decks are there?
Your guess is as good as mine. So there's one base game. and that is Spell Saga Deck 1, The Highlands. And that is, you can buy copies of that, or you can download it for free and like print it at home or your, overpriced local print shop. And that is everything you need to play the game over and over again with not a definitive ending, but still an end point of some sort. There's a Deck 2 expansion and a Deck 3 expansion. You got the forest and the caves. And you work your way through each deck, and you gather the resources from the deck that you're in and bring them to the next deck. And there's also as yet unpublished endlude, little 25 card deck that will be the end of the main story. And there's also a prelude deck which has been published, which is just like an advanced 25 card true beginning of the story, which is kind of played like a flashback, like after you know what you're doing. It's fun to go back and go, oh, this is how the character's journey started.
Right. So it's a cards only game. The player does need to contribute a couple of their own tokens, right? But there's not really like stacks and stacks of resource tokens or anything like that we find in a lot of other card games, right?
No, you can use a cigarette butt or a bottle cap. I've seen a lot of things. Yeah, you can use anything you need.
Yeah. And I really appreciate the card-only aspect of the design because it really makes it easy to just take the deck or decks anywhere and just plonk them down on a table and go for it. And you don't have to worry about bags of separate counters and tokens and things like that. You can really just...
Right.
I'm always impressed when designers find a way to do something purely only with cards, personally. So... I think that's really an interesting aspect of the design.
Thank you. Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about the aesthetic of the game. So the kind of feeling I get from it is really, really interesting and unique. Like my experience with this game, I first played it many years ago now. I think probably about 5 years ago.
Wow.
When I think the first Kickstarter might have been coming out. I don't know. Somehow my name is in the Weather Guard, and I don't know how my name got into the Weather Guard, but I think I might have backed it.
Oh yeah, if you backed it during the first time when it didn't happen, I probably put your name in.
Yeah, I think that was where it was from because I went and checked the list of backers and my name was in there, and I was like, oh, so I did back this many, many years ago.
I think so.
And I actually remember I assembled the PNP of the game, the print and play. I actually assembled that, and I've not done that for any game before or since. So there's a little honorary badge for you.
That was 2013, so that was like 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow, that's over half a decade.
Wow, so that was even before I moved to South Korea, where I live now. Yeah, that was before I moved here.
Wow, that's crazy. It's so weird because like back then, like it feels like a long time ago, but like print and play was still it felt new, at least to me. Like it wasn't like, I feel like you still had to explain when you wrote the term PNP. Back then you'd have to write, that means print and play, here's what you do. Like that was not every game had that yet, Yeah,
well, I mean, so many games were too complex. They were like fully fledged board games or something of the sort. And print and play was too unwieldy to do. But for your game, I appreciated that it was simple enough to just print some cards, sleeve them up. I think I put them on top of some old Magic Commons or something that I had.
Sure, absolutely.
And I sat down and played it. And this is a little embarrassing, little TMI. I had a weirdly emotional time playing the game.
I'm glad to hear it.
It was really strange. It was like unlike anything I'd played before. The kind of story and the aesthetic and the art and just everything that this game was trying to do, it felt like weirdly nostalgic, tapping into something in me that was kind of raw and emotional. And I'm like, wow, I haven't felt a tabletop game do this to me in a long time. I mean, I occasionally get that with video games because it's a lot more visual, a lot more audio. Yeah. But for a tabletop game to evoke that in me, I was like, wow, this is really amazing. I have to get onto this game and make sure that I back it and that it's successful. And then, of course, the whole history of that Kickstarter is quite the tale in and of itself, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah.
I really do recommend listeners go and read the history of development page because it explains everything that happened there. And it's a really fascinating story. But I don't want to get too much into the Kickstarter side of things, if that's all right with you. I think that's something maybe we could save for a separate day if you're willing to go into that.
A chronicling of my failure is just fine. We could do that sometime. That'd be fine. Let's just go with the bumbling, embarrassing truth of my own dark list. I'm fine.
I've noticed you're not one to gloss over any of this, let's say, negative aspects of the project. You're very open and honest and out there.
Yeah.
And I find that very interesting. A lot of people wouldn't put that out there for marketing purposes, but
for sure.
You don't seem to shy away from being honest. And I think that's really interesting in this day and age.
Well, I'm an idiot. So it's the idea of being truthful and honest with yourself in public is what makes good art. Because as much as, art is pretend often, it still has to have honesty and truth behind it. So, and to me, game design is not just a craft. For me, it's art. And when I started making stuff like everyone else, it was, it's like there's some good ideas, but shit wasn't hitting the right way. And a couple of years ago, I decided to do an experiment where I did this podcast where I would just, it happened right after Spell Saga worked on Kickstarter, and then I lost my job, and I was panicking. I had no money, and I started recording myself panicking, going for a walk, and I decided to make it this podcast called To Be Honest, which is definitely not an original title. But the idea was every week I would take my phone and just record myself and say everything that was on my mind without editing it. And then I wasn't allowed to edit. I had to put it up online, just as an experiment. It led to a lot of weird walls breaking down in my own head and how I would communicate with people, which has only helped with how I make stuff. Because I try to put as much of my real self into it as I can.
Right. And this was a game that took many years to come to fruition, didn't it?
Many.
But yeah, we'll get there in a second. First, I just wanted to ask you, do you play any other strategy card games? Did you at the time? Are you passionate about card games, or did it just seem to be the right vehicle for what you wanted to do? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, let me say real quick that I just want to, I appreciate the reaction that you had the first time that you played it, and it was designed to invoke a sense of inner sort of emotional somethingness and also nostalgia. That's one of the things that I try to do when I make stuff is I want stuff to feel nostalgic immediately, even if you've never seen it. So
yeah, I'm sorry, I glossed over that quite quickly, didn't I? I sort of dropped that on you and then quickly moved on. I think I was embarrassed.
Good. It's supposed to feel like a really sort of touching, embarrassing sort of feeling inside you while you're playing. It's supposed to get into you. You're supposed to feel drawn into it to a point where you sort of lose a little touch with reality while you're playing it. And it's supposed to feel nostalgic. So anytime someone tells me that, it feels like a great win.
Mm.
So I appreciate that.
No, you're welcome.
I have a tendency to ramble, so apologies ahead of time. This podcast is going to be impossible to edit. It's just going to veer off into it's going to look like the wiki page for Dragon Ball. It's just not going to make any sense.
I think it's fair for me to warn my listeners this time around. I think this podcast is going to be a little bit different from all the others because the nature of this game is so unique and it's so intertwined with you as well as the creator. A lot of games you can easily divorce from the person who made it.
Sure.
And just play the game and appreciate the game separately. But so much of yourself and what I know of you is in this game, and it just makes it a very personal project, I think.
Oh, so yeah.
But I mean, let's just quickly give people an idea of what the story is, because we've said it's a tabletop novel.
Yeah.
But what's the story about? Give us the pitch.
The world has ended, and you play as the last minstrel, and you're searching the world to figure out how it ended and what your purpose is now in this post-apocalyptic medieval Western world.
That's right. And it works so well. So you play this kind of bard type character who meets people, meets interesting characters. You have some interesting interactions with them. There's musical magic, which I really enjoy, and I don't think is done often enough in fantasy settings. But the magic is like spell songs, right?
Yeah. So that came actually from years ago. My buddy Jesse Paxton and I, we would stay up like super late with our friend Sakroka. We would stay up in this like family owned empty house way out in the country. I met these guys at like a diner in the middle of the night once, and we were talking about Lord of the Rings. I overheard them, and so like, we would just stay up talking about the weirdest shit that was stuff that only we liked. Like back then it wasn't. It was right before the big fantasy. Like now, my mom talks about Game of Thrones all the time. I'm like, you had me baptized. Like you wouldn't let us go trick or treating. What are you talking about? But like back then, it felt like it was still very niche, and we would stay up all night talking about weird stuff. And we were talking once about like why in Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy stories, like bards and minstrels were like a joke. And we were like, well, how do you change that? And we're like, well, they should be like rock stars. Cause like in real life, when you play music, it's super cool. Like everyone loves you. It's like, well, why isn't it like that in fantasy settings? It's like, well, how would we make it like that? I was like, okay, well, what if their spells were actually the strongest possible magic and it altered reality itself when they played music? I was like, all right, that would work. That would make them like the most powerful characters. Let's do that. And like that would just be like the weird conversations that we'd have. And I just kind of kept seeds of those, late nights and sort of strung them along into my other stuff. So that's where the whole minstrel vibe came from.
That is very cool. I mean, I love music. I'm a huge music fan, and I just love seeing music and fantasy entwined in that way. So I think you really captured the mood with that. I think it's great.
Cool, thanks.
So yeah, when you started out designing, were there any other solo strategy card games out there that you were able to look to for mechanics? Or because I mean, there aren't a lot of solo strategy card games. The ones that seem to be really popular are multiplayer games that also function as a solo game, but yours is solo only, right? So how did that happen?
If there was other games, I didn't know about them, or I would have been playing them. Like I started designing. I came up with Spell Saga in December of 2009. I mean, I had been designing like card-based games or wanting to for a long time, and I'm still working on one that I called Epioc that I started working on back in 1996 or 7. And so like I've been working on card game. I was in 7th grade at the time in middle school. So like I've been working on card games and I loved cards. I'd always kind of in the back of my head toyed with the idea of like, what if you could have a 1-player game? Because I definitely did the thing where like I grew up lonely and I would play games of Magic the Gathering against myself with 2 different decks. I'd move from each side of the room. I did stuff like that.
Yeah.
I liked, role-playing games, although a lot of times it felt like a lot of grind work. And I was like, I really just like stories, and I like the idea of cards. It's something, but even like when I was a little kid, all there was like, baseball cards or like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle cards or New Kids on the Block trading cards. Like I liked cards, like I liked them. So in 2009, it was like I was in a bad place and I wanted to make a game that I could play by myself because I was in a abusive relationship, and like most people that end up in those, I had sort of lost contact with family and friends, both out of abuse and out of embarrassment. And I happened to be playing an RPG on a little small Nintendo, and gave myself the worst migraine I've ever had staring at it, trying to escape out of my shitty life. And I was like, well, I can't play video games now, so I guess I'll just try to design a card game I can play by myself. And Spell Saga sort of sprung out of that time of my life and those goals that I had, which was to go to a safe world where I could be myself and keep myself safe where I was not safe in real life. And so I think that I poured a lot of those, whatever was me, I had to put somewhere else in a box for a while just to survive, and that box was Spell Saga.
I really appreciate you going to that personal place and explaining that, because I think when you play this game, you can feel the raw emotion that's been put into it, and that there is a heavy dose of escapism for sure, but it's a kind of it's not like a hopeless escapism. It's like there's a lot of hope and optimism in this game, and that really shines through. And I think that's what I found so touching. It's like, to me, the game feels like an attempt to find hope and meaning in a difficult situation. So I think hearing you talk about it personally, you can really see where that comes from in the game's etymology, so to speak.
Thanks, man. Well, that's life, is and not to sound like, my dad, but like that is life. Like life is kind of a hopeless situation, and you just got to find hope in it. And fantasy is a really good way to explore that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. And obviously there are some touches of the sort of Japanese role-playing game aesthetic in there as well, isn't there? And I think you mentioned in the history of the game that this came from a moment where you watched a friend play Final Fantasy VII at a time when you weren't allowed to play that kind of thing. Am I remembering that accurately?
I wasn't allowed to play, Dungeons and Dragons and things like that as a kid, and certainly not Magic right away until I tricked my dad into it. But like I grew up extremely, an extremely religious household that really fucked me up really bad. And I knew what a role-playing game was because, they were evil and I wanted to play them. But like, I didn't know what a JRPG was, and I had never heard of Final Fantasy. And I saw Final Fantasy VII on a big screen TV at the right age, which was 7th grade. And it had just come out. It blew me away. And it had a trickle-down effect on the rest of my life. It completely cut out the courses that my life would run. But I do want to say, looping back real quick to the idea of the sort of hope and hopelessness all thing, what I kind of wanted to do by design was make a game where it wasn't just where I could put myself, but the player could also maybe put their self as well. It's like a weird box to keep yourself safe in. I want other people to feel that way too, where it's not just my sort of feelings that are in there. It might be a safe space for another person as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely think that comes through in the game. And I think, I mean, I don't know, you're the creator, and you've probably had a lot of communications from people who've played that. So I'm guessing maybe you've heard similar stories from other people who have been touched by it in a similar way, or has there been that kind of feedback?
Yeah, some really touching shit. I'll tell you without going too much into detail. There was a guy who, and we're friends now on the internet, which is how the future works. But he wrote me this really public long comment on one of the fundraiser pages, and he said that he was playing the print and play version of the game, which at that point was only one deck. The forest wasn't there, so he was just playing the Highlands over and over again. His wife at the time had just been diagnosed with cancer, and to escape that, or to deal with it rather, he was playing the Highlands over and over again and telling himself on some subconscious level that every time he reached the forest, his wife was going to be okay.
Wow.
And he wrote me that comment publicly, and I kind of leaned back against the wall and just kind of melted down into the ground. I was like, what the fuck? That is the most...
That's heavy, isn't it?
Heavy and gorgeous thing someone could it's a game, but it's also not a game. Do you think that's fair? Do you what do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too much into whether I believe in magic or not, but I definitely think that there is something magical about this game, and I use that in the purest sense of the word. There's something about this game that is pure magic, and that's why I was so eager to get you on the podcast to talk about it. And
nice.
I think there's something about this that feels almost similar to tarot cards, in the sense that
Yeah.
As you're shuffling through the cards and the story and moving these pieces around, I feel like I'm moving around pieces in my mind,
Yeah.
pieces of emotion, pieces of memory, pieces of things that I can't put a name to. I mean, that sounds crazy, but like that's what this game made me feel when I play it.
No, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like, again, I'm an idiot, but I think that this is good art, or it's attempting to be good art, like attempting with a capital A, like it's attempting to be art, but it's meant to invoke shit, and to me that was more important. I'm sure detractors would latch onto this, but that was more important than the mechanics or anything else. Was it good art?
Yeah. Well, I think you nailed it. That's just my personal opinion, and I hope that as others discover it and experience it, I hope that they also feel similarly about it, because it's not just a game. A lot of games you can play and you're like, okay, really, I'm just playing with a math system that's got pictures on it, and occasionally I feel that when I'm playing a game and I'm like, okay, yeah, I can see the theme is kind of pasted on. But at the end of the day, what I'm really looking at is the 2 attack power against the 1 defense power or whatever, But with this game,
and that can be fun,
yeah, for sure. But it's not gonna make you feel things on an emotional level, not to the consistent level to which this game does, at least from my experience.
I appreciate that, and thank you for all the kind things that you're saying about this thing that destroyed my life. But
I did notice that during the history of Spell Saga, you had a lot of problems with this project, as a lot of projects do encounter many problems along the way.
Oh yeah,
and it was interesting to note that your reaction to dealing with stressful situations seemed to be, I'm going to go and work on this other new game, or I'm going to work on this other this other project for a bit. And it seemed to be kind of your way of dealing with the stress of the situation. Is that a fair assessment of what happened?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's either that or masturbating. You can cut that. That's true.
Yeah,
that's true though.
Yeah, or substances was the other thing I was not going to mention.
Man, you certainly can. I'm accidentally straight edge, but yeah, there was plenty of substance abuse. Just alcohol, really. Well, I guess Skittles and alcohol were kind of my substance abuse.
Wow.
And cigarettes, of course.
I can see Skittles all over this game now that you mentioned that. Like the bright, saturated color.
Yeah, those old 90s commercials that took place in a fantasy setting. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Actually, the bright, saturated colors were not there in the beginning. Those were completely because of Lauren's art had so much color in it that eventually I figured out, the rest of the game should look like that.
Yeah.
So that was Lauren.
Your cousin worked on the art for this game, Lauren Rogers, right?
Uh-huh.
And big shout out to Lauren. You did a fantastic job on this game. Like truly, it's amazing. And I know the art style is not going to be to everyone's taste. I think that's fair to say that up front.
Sure.
But
sure.
I absolutely adore it. Like I love that it's bright, it's colorful. It's cartoony, but it also has a sense of realism to it as well at times, which is kind of an interesting blend of the dreamlike quality of the game and then the very real human aspects of it. It's kind of that clash going on there.
I think it was important for us to kind of have, and she came up with the art style. She was in high school when she started doing this, and she lives in Florida. And we would just communicate over Facebook or whatever, and call each other. But she wrote me one night. She was like, I think I have a vision. And like, she just sent me like what became like the cover of the game eventually. And it's a good combination of something that feels very golden book, sort of classic, sort of 1930s, 40s, 50s, something like some old illustration, sort of childish style, but also something that allows her to put very real emotions on the characters' faces. So she's sort of melded a lot of different ideas into it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hidden genius in the way that she did this, and it really takes a lot of repeat plays with the game to
Me too.
really just see how deep it is in its simplicity. Does that make sense? Like it's not just simple; there is depth to it, and
absolutely, yeah.
It's fantastic. It just works perfectly for the game. The dreamlike quality, the fantastical but human element. It's great. I'm sure at times she was pulling her hair out over the whole thing because of how long you guys worked on it. And
she still is. Yeah. She just sent me. I mean, we're working on Deck 3, The Caves, right now, which the plan is to release in October. So the store is opening like this week, next week, something like that. The online shop, and then the plan is, if Kickstarter will have us back, we'll just kickstart the last deck this October, which would be the 5-year anniversary of the last Kickstarter, which took 5 years for everything to get manufactured and stuff. So, we'll see what happens. But either way, we've been working on a bunch of Spell Saga stuff in the background throughout this year. And she just sent me more Deck 3 enemy art recently, which is every deck she changes it up just a little bit. And this deck's got some really creepy, eerie looking shit, which is still cartoonish, which is a really fun combination. But a lot of times, like I'll just come up with really ridiculous names because, like, I like to have some classic fantasy shit. Like, you got your goblins, you got your, whatever, cockatrice, whatever. But then it'll be like, well, let's evolve the names just like we tried to do with the game, and like see if we can somehow get other people to like accidentally use one of our fantasy. Like that's kind of my goal. Is like it's like if Kick a Crit or Feckelknacker ends up in some other fantasy game, like I'm not gonna be mad. Like I think that's funny that these dumb names I came up with would suddenly be. It's like adding to the toy box, and. So, like, I'll just come up with ridiculous names. Like, I think this time we have, like, a Boonch is a name, some just stupid shit. And then I'll write weird descriptions that there's no way they could be illustrated. And then she'll just be like, Todd. And then she'll just still come up with something amazing and send it to me. I'm like, awesome. That's cool.
But I just wanted to go back and make one more comment about the art before we move on. And, if Lauren, if you're listening, I just want you to know that you did a fantastic job on this. And
for sure,
this really applies to anyone that's slaving away on something in private or in a small group that is struggling or cannot see the end of this. And I want you to know that work will come to fruition. And when it does, other people see it and respect it and get immeasurable joy from it. So I just want Lauren to know that in all those dark times when she was struggling to do this art, it was all for a good cause, and the game is fantastic, and it's now getting out there and reaching people and touching people. So I hope that she can hear that and be really proud of that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it on her behalf. I would also add, like nothing is ever really finished; it's just done.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're not embarrassed by what you've made, first of all, you fucked up, because it should be embarrassing what you made, because that means it's honest and truthful.
Right.
But also, if you try to get it as good as you can, like, and you're still embarrassed, that's supposed to be, it's normal. Like you're supposed to kind of have a weird love-hate relationship with everything that you make, I think.
Yeah. Real art should make you feel raw and exposed, I reckon. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay. So how did you manage to get the game into the place where it finally ended up in terms of the mechanics? Like, you made this game so many times with new reiterations, and you did a lot of, like, it's about a 10-year development cycle. Is that about right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
And not a lot of games get worked on for 10 years consistently, like these days the advice is, if you're working on a game for 10 years, you probably should abandon it and move on to something else. Like you see a lot of people,
which is good advice.
You see a lot of people with these pet projects that have been working on for like 15, 20 years, and almost without fail, you can tell that they really should have just dropped it a long time ago and moved on to something else,
Oh yeah.
But I think this is actually the rare case where, like, 10 years of work has finally shaped it into something that I don't think you could have banged out this design in 6 months. You know,
Well,
this is clearly the culmination of a lot of blood, a lot of tears, a lot of sweat, you know. And what can you say about that?
I would say that I wasn't designing in a vacuum. You know, like my buddy Sakroka is maybe the world's greatest playtester. He's incredible. You know, I've said before, but he probably should have been a general in someone's army. But I had people along the way that would try it and say, like, this isn't fun, but you have something here. Usually it was Sakroka. For the most part, people liked it and would say, like, this is really fun, and your rules make no sense. That was, you know, often. I mean, the rule book was originally 50-something pages, and now I think I got down to 13. Like, it was hard to explain how to play something that had never been made before, which sounds, you know, ridiculous. But there are the rare people that I've met in my life. I've met 3 people, Giovannina, Joshua, Josie, and Tony. They were the 3 people that have played this game. And all I had to do was hand them the cards. And they're like, what's this do? What's this do? Got it. And like, that's just how their heads work. But that's not, you know, normal. Most people can't do that. So it took a very long time of trial and error of getting a game to a point that made sense to more than, you know, 3 people or just myself.
Yeah.
And that was, again, not in a vacuum. I had a lot of help.
And there's a good lesson in there about thorough playtesting to get something into a good final state, right? And I think this game has been playtested probably more than like 99% of other games out there were playtested before they hit the market. Like what this game went through to get to the stage that it's at is crazy.
Certainly by myself, yeah.
Yeah, so what comes out, it's definitely a very polished design, I think. It feels that way to me anyway.
Oh, thank you. It doesn't to me, but again, everything should feel embarrassing when you release it. So Spell Saga is so chaotic at times that I'm talking about, like the game design and gameplay. Someone wrote online that it was the card combinations border on madness, and I think that's a fair assessment.
That's a fantastic description. Yeah,
and it was designed that way, but like it because of that, it's like you never know what someone's going to do. It's going to break what you did. And I had to kind of early on, instead of panicking, kind of tell myself, okay, you've done what you can do, but it's okay if someone breaks it, because as long as they're having fun, the game is working. It is a solo play game. It is not, you're not playing against an opponent. You're not even really playing against the deck. Like, it is a game that's meant to explore, not just the cards, but yourself. So if they're having fun, it's okay. Because there are things that, like, I'll tell you right now. So the green song is a card that you can literally break the entire game and lose the game immediately after playing with it. Like, that's one that was designed poorly, but I kept it. I was like, that's fine. Because it's kind of a crazy game.
I like that because it's not a 2-player sort of hyper competitive game, that you do have the freedom to, like, I found myself thinking with some of the rules, like, wait, how does this work? Do I need to do it this way? Or and then I thought, well, hold on. Okay, if I can make an argument that this card works in this way, then why shouldn't it? Because
exactly so.
I'm in this fantasy land. I'm a minstrel that has music magic, and I can bend reality. So if the wording of this card makes sense to me in this way, why not? And because you're not playing, you know, a game of Magic with somebody that's going to get upset if you choose that wording. No one's going to argue, right? And then it becomes almost like a fun kind of wordplay of trying to find those like hidden aspects of the cards that you could make a case for to use in a certain way, I think.
Yeah, and it was designed that way, and I'm sure it's a nightmare for all the translators. The game has been translated into Italian and German and Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese by fans of the game who are now friends of mine, and I'm sure that's a nightmare. And I've heard, like, they're like, can we please use symbols and things? Like, nah, like, it's just words. Like, it's meant to be that way. I know that's a nightmare, but in the end, I think it'll be helpful.
So one thing I would like to ask you about, which I have seen a couple of times as a criticism of the game, is that some of the cards do have a lot of text on them. And I mean, we're sort of getting into sort of Yu-Gi-Oh territory with some of these cards where the font shrinks as the effect gets longer, and a couple of them are a bit of a struggle.
Yes.
But I can see why you went in this way with these cards. I'm just wondering if you could talk a bit about that. Did you ever think maybe I should like slash half of the text on this card to make it simpler, or did you think, no, I'm going to make it the way I want to make it, and I'm going to let people sort of deal with it as it is?
Oh yeah, of course. It's honestly, it's a little bit of both. Like and again, every time I go back and redo the cards for another language, or because I figured out a better way to like, I just redid the entire first Realmwalker deck for the umpteenth time because I got figured out how to make it look better art wise and wording wise with the text. Like, I can make this text bigger this way. I can delete some of these words. Like, it's trial and error. And like, some of those early cards have mistakes. Like, there's a few with typos because that's like my signature for some reason. And there's also, too many words. And it's like, again, trying to create something that hasn't been created before, it's really hard to be succinct. It takes 5 or so years to shrink a rule book from 50 pages to 13 or so. And it's same with the card rulings. Like, I'm now at a point where I can have a little bit of shorthand when I'm writing the rules. And I know how to get the point across a lot quicker. But because there's no real symbols, it's just wording. Some of those ideas on those cards were too thought out and too advanced. And as I go forward, continuing to create this game there is an end point. There's a destination when the whole entire story of this world is done. Hopefully by the end, it'll be fun and look nice and simple, and it won't be a thing where it's like I cannot read. And also, people hate the font on the names, which I get, but at the same time, just squint. It's supposed to be a Germanic font that's hard to read. Like, it's supposed to invoke a certain feeling, and maybe that's bad game design, but aesthetically, I think it's good design. So it's a bit of a balance.
Did you ever consider moving to the tarot card size format for this game? Because I mean, thematically, it would have worked perfectly to do that. I mean, I know there are a lot of cards that need to go onto the table. So in terms of like space, this is a very space hungry game, right? Like, it can sprawl across your entire.
Yeah, it is. In fact, it was designed to be annoying, but like basically, tarot cards, just the shape of a tarot card doesn't do it for me. Design wise, it would have worked better. Tabletop wise, probably not, again, because of the space, but like the whole spacing is like, that's something that I had that was helpful to hear from everybody. Deck 3, the caves, is massive. So I wanted it to be like, you better spread it across your house on different tables. So to me, like, that idea is really fun. But then I was like, okay, enough people have complained about space. Like, they want a traditional tabletop experience, and it gives them anxiety to not have that. So I was like, okay, going forward, how do I combine that? How do I combine the idea that you can make this game sprawling versus fit it on one like small space? And so going forward, like, Deck 3 the Caves is being designed in a way that you play it both ways at the same time. Like as you're playing, you can expand the caves out, or you can keep it very, very tight on the table. And that came about completely from people having played it for, the last 5 years and writing to me about it.
If you could start designing it from the beginning, I mean, if you could go back to your younger self that started this whole project, what would you say to him? What would you do differently?
Yeah. Everything. Everything.
Do you think you would have started the project if you knew what it was going to entail in all of its highs and lows and everything along the way?
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm an idiot. So yes, I would have. But I would have been more cautious about something. And again, like part of the hard part about answering that is like when I was younger, when it was 10 years ago, Kickstarter was just starting. Tabletop games had not even exploded to the point where they are now. And there wasn't a fucking group of strategy card game makers with a podcast that I'm not. Like that wasn't like we were all in caves still. No one knew each other. Like it was very rare. Like I didn't know anyone else making card games growing up. Like maybe one person said they were, but they, weren't. The idea that you could have a website, you would pick which cards were going to be in your deck and then print them seemed absolutely impossible to me. And I remember driving around trying to figure out like, how do you do that? And also, how do you explain to people, print these cards out and put it in card sleeves? It'll feel like a regular card game. That shit still wasn't happening yet. So now you have this thing where we have shorthand, like, oh, it's P&P and it's this and it's that and it's a deck building game. Like none of that shit existed. So back when I was making this stuff, if I could go back in time, I would be like, okay, this is how it goes. This is how this works. Everyone does it this way. Like it would be so easy, but everyone was just stumbling in the dark for so many years that just the fact that I could log on to a website right now, upload art and have holofoil cards arrive in the mail in 2 or 3 weeks from China is absolutely insane to me.
Yeah.
What a time to be alive. I have like in the mail coming today, the first test printing of the new Spell Saga playmat is arriving. And it's like, I just uploaded a file and paid some money and here it is. Like, it's like, that did not exist when I started doing this.
Right.
Nothing did. And I'm so happy and grateful. And I would just go back in time and say, everything's going to be great. And there's going to be a few shortcuts eventually, but you're fucked for the next 10 years. And I would still make it.
Well, that's what I think is so exciting about this game is that it genuinely comes across as like nothing else out there right now. And
thank you.
That's really what I find so amazing about it is that, yeah, you were stumbling in the dark with a lot of these things, but perhaps the fact that you didn't have a large community of people to shoot you down on some idea that you had that you thought was good, but they didn't, that maybe that's what gave birth to this game is that it wasn't a kind of a chrysalis of its own, to kind of become what it became in isolation to everything else.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, I am historically bad at games, and I'm bad even my own games. Like if I play with my friends, they always win. Like I'm playing for other reasons. Like if I were to play like Catan or something with someone, my goal is to get all the sheep and then make everyone call me the shepherd. Like I don't play games correctly, and that probably goes into my game design. But like, yeah.
Okay, so can I ask you a bit about the solo aspect of the game? Solo gaming is really exploding right now. Like, have you noticed? Are you seeing what's going on with the solo gaming?
Isn't that strange? Yeah. And it's crazy. I mean, it was bound to happen.
Yeah, and you started on this as a solo game, 10 or more years before. What do you think about the rise of solo gaming? What do you think it says about us? I mean, is there something societal or psychological about why so many people are turning now to solo games?
I mean, probably there's good and bad things, but I just think that we are getting smarter as consumers and as makers, and it was bound to get to the point where we can go like, oh, you know what? We can advance this idea, or we can take, what we've said, just like we can take the pulps and turn them into radio plays and turn them into science fiction, crazy blockbuster movies. Like we can evolve video games and turn them into card games. Like we can have that sort of experience with cardboard and tokens. And like, it's just a natural progression of society saying, we got this far, now we can do an electric battery. Like it's normal.
Do you think there's anything to the idea that a lot of people are struggling to play multiplayer games with a group in person, or do you think there's anything to that idea that like returning to solo gaming just because it's so difficult to get a group of people to sit down and play something all at the same time?
I mean, are you saying that like we as a society right now are in a lonelier space and missing genuine connection because we're all on screens? Then yeah, probably that's true. We've never been more connected or disconnected at the same time, which is strange. But things come and go. Like things, are like the tide. Like Dungeons and Dragons is suddenly back in a way that warms my heart. And so that's a lot of group playing now, and now there's like board game cafes and shit. There's one in town here, and like my wife, she was like at a board game cafe a couple weeks ago, and she looked over. Her friend had taken her, and she was like, "Oh my god, all these people are playing games!" And she looked over, and some guy was playing a card game by himself, and she was like, "Oh my god," because like she knows how long I've been working towards this stuff, and to see it sort of blooming in society for her was that was kind of a real treat to see her reaction to that. So, things are changing.
That's very cool. Maybe now is the best time for this game to finally be ready to be revealed to everyone. I mean,
maybe so.
If it had come out 10 years ago, do you think it would have had the same impact that it's having on people and is about to have?
No, but I'll say this. I think people were hungry for this sort of stuff. So let's see, 2013, I put the game up on Reddit, just like a little post about it, and it crashed the website right after I did, like 90,000 hits immediately. It crashed the website.
Wow.
So I know that people are hungry for this thing, for something like this. It doesn't have to be my game. Something else will come along that's a better idea and version than what I've made. That's just the nature of things. But like, I think it's the right direction. If it had come out 10 years ago, no, it wouldn't have the effect. And maybe it won't have the right effect till another 5 or 10 years from now. I don't know.
Well, I'm really excited for you. I'm really excited for this game. And I really recommend all of our listeners go straight to the website and check out the shop. And this is the first time I'm saying this on the podcast, but all designers listening to this, you have to buy this game. I'm not even giving you an option. You have to buy it, because not only will you learn more about yourself as a designer as you're playing this, but you're going to experience something that's genuinely groundbreaking. And I think it's really exciting and rare when that happens, especially in the card game world, where, as you said, a lot of things are just recycling old games and mechanics and clones. Mm-hmm. So I really do want everyone to go immediately and pick up a copy of this, because I think you're going to find something really special in this game.
Thank you. And also, we should probably mention that privately you had asked me if I was going to, trademark or copyright any of the game's mechanics or the term tabletop novel, and I very purposely have not, because I would rather put things in the toy box than take them away, and I would love to play someone else's tabletop novel.
I think that's really fantastic, and that really shows a generous spirit as a designer to say to people, hey, go ahead, have your own go at this and play with it, twist it, create something new, do what you like with it. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think the best stuff in our culture comes from, is when we have that open sort of remix culture of, go ahead, remix that, do something new with it. I really think a lot of industries don't realize how remixing something can also be a benefit to the original product. Like, people are going to go and buy that original product to check out where the remix came from. You know, like, I'm a big believer in that.
And also, how many game designers had a panic attack trying to figure out if turning their cards sideways was going to get them sued by Wizards of the Coast? Like I can't tell you how much time I spent on the internet being like, what's legal and what's not legal? What can I use? And like, it's not worth it. It's like, just copy my shit and make it better. Just make it better. Like, don't just copy, make it better, please. But like, it shouldn't be that hard. But like, just make it better.
I greatly appreciate that in the tabletop game design world, that no one has found a way to like really strictly copyright mechanics, because like all games are just remixes of stuff that's come before. Like, it's rare to find a game that is 100% completely original, right? And that's what makes our industry so interesting and fun, is that we are all building on each other's work in new and exciting ways. And why wouldn't we want that to continue? Because that's where all the fun stuff comes from. And yeah, so I really appreciate you as a designer saying to people, go for it. Like, if you want to play around with this system, I'm more than happy to let you do that. I think that shows a lot of maturity as a creator.
Thank you. I'm going to take their ideas and I'm going to steal them, and then I'm going to use them for Spell Saga 2. So just keep that in mind.
Yes, that's fantastic. Okay, so let's start to wrap this up. I would like you to just give us your final thoughts in terms of what advice do you have for others who are just starting out the design process, or maybe they're in the middle of designing a game, or they're in the depths of depression with one of their particular designs that's ruining their life. What would you say to them?
Yeah, stop drinking. That's what I'd say. It did wonders for me. No, I would say, it's art, and that's all really. Anything that you make is, and art is just the act of communication. So if you're not communicating with people through your design or your ideas, I don't know what you want to communicate, but hopefully something about yourself or your headspace or your mood that day, like that's to me more important than anything else. And anything else someone else is going to tell you play testing wise, and they say this mechanic doesn't work or this idea is dumb, but they can't really tell you your mood and communication are dumb. And now if you're being honest and truthful, and like that's what makes something unique in its own game, and that's the tone that people are searching for when they play stuff, whether they know it or not. Just like when you watch any movie, when it's good or bad, because like there's honesty and truth behind it. If it's good, that's the most important advice I would have. Also, have people play test it and take advice, and not everyone is always right with their advice, but if enough people have a problem with something, figure out your own solution to it. No one's going to have, it's rare that someone has the right solution. Like just the fact that people have a problem is good enough to go, okay, I need to fix this, or they're all wrong and I'm a genius, it can happen, but it's rare. Like you might want to be listening to people, but yeah, art's just communication.
I've heard it said by designers much better than I that playtesters are great at finding out what's wrong with your game, but they're not so great at finding ways to fix it.
Yeah.
So you should always have a healthy amount of skepticism with the solutions that they offer for how to fix that. Because ultimately, playtesters know more about playing games than designing them most of the time, and it's better to just go with what you think is right than with what they think you should do to fix the game. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And also, like, you are creating an object, and you should know how that object is supposed to feel to the person before you even really designing it, or as you're designing it. Like for me, I knew Spell Saga. I didn't know the story, but I knew the feeling of it. I knew the tone of it. I could imagine as I was first writing on index cards, like someone is alone at a table in a room and they're opening up this box, and this box feels like this. And as they're playing it, it feels like this. And whether that's a competitive game or a solo play or whatever, like you should, I think that it's good to have that stuff in mind. Like the player feels this while they're opening the box, and while they're playing this, or while they're wanting to purchase this, like just the vibe around it. And that's as important to me as the mechanics and the design and all that shit.
That's fantastic. Thanks very much for that, Todd. So for people that want to buy Spell Saga and want to know more, where can they go?
Spellsaga.com.
Fantastic. And when is the web shop live? When can people buy it?
We're going to do a soft opening May 15th to see if it crashes. And then we're going to, or see what else can go wrong. And then June 1st, it'll be like live, but anyone can get to it before that. So May 15th or June 1st. But with the product, we have limited product. Let me put it that way. So if you want it, you better go get it.
Yes. And as I've said, listeners, you have no choice. You must go pick up this game because you will be glad that you did. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes. And follow me on Instagram. I'm Subheathen, Subheathen, because that's where I post Subheathen's sort of like my sort of just website. So that's where I post a lot of like upcoming Spell Saga and like game design stuff and my bands. And like, if you like listening to me lisp my way through this conversation and want to know more about how I design games, that's probably the best way to know more stuff.
Good stuff. Okay, Todd, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Yeah, just thanks for sharing yourself with us, and it's very personal at times, but we really appreciate that you're really a raw, honest person, and it really comes through in the way that you talk about your game, and it's been great to listen to you talking about it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
One more thing, ladies and gentlemen, the music is by Boxcat Games. It's from the Hackers RPG soundtrack. It's under a Creative Commons license. I love it. I hope you like it too. All right. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that was Cardcasters. I'm your host, Zach Phoenix. See you next time.